Hey guys, Tim Marks here from Leap Habitats. Welcome to another episode of Leap Learning. Today we are joined again by Christie of Christie's Reptile Room, and we're going to focus on the husbandry of the Satanic Leaf-Tailed Gecko, Uroplatus phantasticus. Yesterday we talked about how you became so enamored by this species, and we mentioned briefly just how many of them you actually have. Why don't we talk now about how you are able to provide for those organisms and what the requirements of husbandry for a phantasticus gecko actually is?
Sure, there's so many things that go into it. It really is a huge topic. But the most important thing for me is I do a lot of bioactive enclosures, which
Absolutely.
I really strongly highly recommend, especially for this species. The more natural environment you can give them, the better off they're going to be. We talked a little bit about temperatures, how important temperatures are. Temperature ranges are especially important for them. They don't like heat at all. They don't thrive in it.
So when we say heat, I mean, you know, from one person's perspective, keeping bearded dragons, that's 110 degrees potentially under the basking light. So what number are we talking about? What do we want to keep it under?
I typically keep my gecko room under 75 degrees. The individual cages do have UVB lighting on them that warm them slightly, but not a great deal. So at nighttime, they do appreciate a very nice night drop. I take mine down to about 68 degrees. And of course, this is seasonal as well. Wintertime temperatures are going to be significantly lower.
Daytime peak and nighttime low.
Yes.
Okay, so that corresponds with the way we're doing things in our Leap laboratory. We're keeping our room at about 75 degrees peak heat during the summer, about 70 degrees during the winter during the day, and then nighttime we're dropping to about 67 or so at 60. Yeah, about 67 or so at night, 68, and down to 62 during the winter.
Yeah, that's very, very close to what I'm doing. I do take mine a little cool in the winter, but part of that is because some of the other species in the gecko room also like colder winter temperatures. And the phantasticus can handle it.
Well, and it's critical. I brought this up with other species, but we believe strongly, based on our experience, that cooling an animal down during the winter is absolutely essential to their long-term survival, reproductive health, and individual health.
Yes, I agree completely, and for all of the reasons you stated. They need a cool down period. You have females who, even if you aren't breeding them, they're going to lay eggs throughout the breeding season. So without that cooling period, they never get a break, and you start dealing with issues like calcium crashes, which can be very quickly detrimental for this species.
Okay. Well, while we're on the topic of calcium, what's your supplementation schedule? What supplements do you like to use?
So I actually recently switched to the Pangea calcium, which I actually really like. I actually really like it. It's very, very fine and adheres really, really well to the feeders. So I really like that.
Does that supplement include D3?
That one does, yes. So that is one of the calciums I use. But because I use UVB, I only use the calcium with D3 a couple times a week. Most of their feedings are without D3 or with a vitamin supplement.
So one interesting thing about calcium supplementation and phantasticus that I've seen both in social media, speaking with other specialists, and also within our own collection, is the accumulation of calcium sacs in females. Now, I'd like to ask you about that, but preface it with, so far from my personal experience, I've only seen the accumulation of calcium sacs in females that are not producing. Does your experience support that observation? Have you been able to eliminate them once they happen? What is your experience?
So my experience is the females that have overly large calcium sacs often don't produce very well.
That's right.
I don't know if it's because their bodies are not properly passing the calcium on to their eggs, or if they're just, I don't know. I feel like we're missing something in the processing of that calcium, and that's why it's accumulating instead of being used.
Have you experienced young females develop the calcium sacs?
Yes, I've absolutely seen very young females, even from the time they're half grown, I'll start to see them. And when I do, I usually back off on the calcium.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that has had positive results?
Yeah, and usually it levels itself out pretty quickly.
Interesting. So we've been fortunate not to have a huge problem with that. Now, with respect to saying it's a problem, just understand I haven't lost an animal due to it. But as you mentioned, they're not breeding. So in terms of the chicken or the egg here, I'm going to say that agree with you. I think there's a reproductive issue going on, and that creates accumulation of or it facilitates the accumulation of
Yeah,
the
that's been my theory. So that's everything my experience has been, is it's indicative of something else that's going on that's not happening quite the way it should.
Okay, so we are getting a little advanced with that topic. So let's back up then. We've spoken about your preference for a bioactive, which I completely agree with. A healthy, thriving substrate with a good fungal, bacteria, microorganism mixture is essential. At this point, it is, my opinion is that it is the modern way of reptile keeping, especially for smaller organisms, and it makes life so much easier.
I've been really happy to see the hobby going more and more towards a more natural way of keeping them. I think it's just beneficial for everything.
Yeah, I mean, as a keeper, it makes your husbandry simpler.
It does, much simpler. A lot of people don't expect that, but the better you set up your enclosure, the less maintenance you're really going to have to do on it. It pretty well will take care of itself outside of you providing humidity, moisture.
Right, food, moisture, supplementation, exactly. So why don't we go then so we've spoken about temperature. I agree the best way to maintain temperature is to keep your room temperature within control, and the UV lighting above your terrarium will be enough additional heat for the reptile. Absolutely. We too use UV. We use a 5.0 bulb. We also provide LED light because we like a nice lush plant growth.
Yes.
And the more light, the better there. Let's talk about humidity, which as you know from our discussions with husbandry is different than rainfall, misting.
Quite different, yes, quite different. So I'm lucky enough that in my basement, my humidity levels are pretty high. My relative humidity stays around 60 to 70%, going up or down depending on the time of year, how much heat or cooling I have to run. But aside from that, it really stays pretty stable, which has helped a lot in keeping the species, and all Uroplatus really.
Okay. So let's pick a number for, if we're going to make a recommendation to, interested keepers or people who are already keeping, let's pick a number for day and nighttime humidity levels.
My daytime humidity levels and what I prefer, I like them to be between 60 and 70%. Drops below that, I start getting a little concerned. And getting above that, you start to have issues with mold growth and things like that. That's stuff you don't want to deal with.
So you like to maintain that day and night?
At nighttime, it does usually go up because I won't have as much heat or air conditioning running, so it will go up to 75, but I really try not to let it get above 80 because, again, you start running into all the problems.
Okay. So. Yeah, so within our reptile room, we shoot for 60 degrees during the day. We actually do hit about 60% during the day. Sorry about that one. At night, we do hit about 80%, and we target that because, as you know, we keep a lot of chameleons.
Right.
So far, we've seen no adverse effects in the phantasticus. We've had a pretty solid breeding year, but the important thing is that we both agree that 60% number during the day is critical.
Yeah.
And then why don't we close it off with discussing rainfall, how often you are providing water in the form of a mist during the day, and do you mist before nighttime?
So I mist every evening because my relative humidity is so high. If I mist too often, I end up with a sopping wet mess in the cages.
Absolutely.
So I just mist once in the evening, right before lights go out or right after they go out, so that the geckos are becoming active enough to go actually drink the water. I still hand mist. It's one thing I hope to eventually change, but it has helped me to fine tune what I need to do for each cage.
There's no discrediting the value of being able to actually sit there and interact with your animal one at a time. If you're doing it during misting, at least you're doing it, and you can see the health. You can make sure the enclosure is the way it needs to be. You can avoid oversaturating it, which you hinted on as well.
Yeah, oversaturation can definitely be a problem, and it's mostly just because it's so hard once it's oversaturated to back it off with the humidity requirements and rain requirements that they have.
Yeah, it's not going to evaporate.
No, so it just
You're going to have to drain
there.
it.
You do. It just sits there.
Yeah. So let's close the husbandry discussion then on feeding.
So I feed a variety of feeders to most of my animals. Phantasticus are no different, but my primary feeders for them are crickets and dubia roach nymphs.
So have you found that the dubias are able to actually they don't just hide from the phantasticus?
Phantasticus tend to go absolutely bonkers over them and will pull them out as soon as you put them in. I rarely have any left over after a feeding.
Okay, so this is news to me, because we do not feed dubia to phantasticus.
Yeah, I really like it. It seems to be really great, especially for keeping weight on breeding females. I really like the way that the body condition progresses on it. But they love them. They just really love them. That's a fun treat for them. They always eat more on dubia nights.
And if any of you guys don't already know, the beauty of dubia roaches is that with one colony, you can actually reproduce it and you can be self-sustaining, whereas crickets, it's much more difficult.
Definitely a lot more difficult, especially when you go through 200 animals worth.
we buy our crickets.
Same. But dubia roach colony I keep.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today and taking the time to talk with us about our favorite gecko.
Yeah, anytime.
Tomorrow we will resume the conversation and discuss the breeding of the species, which is a pretty interesting topic to say the least.
Very interesting
we'll
topic.
talk about some colors as well. Guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Leap Learning. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on Instagram at leap.habitats. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.